over and everybody gets down and,
I'll be done.
yeah.
It's a shame we have to have that, but
Oh, God, I
it's
know.
the world we're in.
You're in charge of street, solid waste, landfill, and is that the three?
Airport
Airport,
and wastewater treatment plant.
wastewater treatment. Okay. And you obviously have the most employees under your,
Yeah.
okay. Largest department. Next to what, PD,
Yeah, I think so.
probably?
Yeah.
We are live on Facebook?
We're going live now, yeah.
Okay.
So,
I'd like to welcome everyone to the November 2022 Mayor's Update. And we have as our guest today Public Works Director Mark White. And Mark has been with the city for a long time. He and I go way back.
We do.
I was on the council when Mark was hired as the Public Works Director, but his work for the city goes back beyond that, way back, and he's held just about every job in Public Works, I think, that you can imagine. But before we get to Mark's little part of this, I just want to really compliment our Public Works division. And Mark has responsibility over streets, solid waste, landfill, wastewater treatment plant, the airport. And these are the people that do an outstanding job, day in, day out. They're the people who got our streets cleared of snow this past 24 hours. They're the people, if you have a sewer main break in the middle of the night, they're coming out to take care of it. We have street flooding in the middle of the night. They're coming out to take care of it. And they don't often get the recognition that they're due, but these people really work so hard for the citizens of Spencer, and I think they deserve some public recognition from time to time. And I know Mark does a nice job of complimenting the people that work in the various departments of Public Works on a regular basis when he gives his monthly reports as well. But today, Mark is here to talk about snow. Now, when I asked Mark about 3 weeks ago, I thought that we were going to be ahead of the game and talking about preventative measures and things like that. But you know, we live in Iowa, and we had a couple snow events, and so, but moving forward, we are bound to have a little bit more snow, I'm pretty sure. So Mark is here to talk about the snow season and what Public Works does in terms of their decision making, maybe the schedule of the routes and the routine that they go through. There's a lot of planning that takes place with regard to Public Works. They have to work hand in hand with the PD on a regular basis. What constitutes a snow emergency? All of those kinds of things that I think most of us, myself included, just take for granted that things are going to get done, but it doesn't come without a lot of pre-planning. It doesn't come without a lot of people who are very skilled at what they do. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark.
Well, thank you, and thanks for the compliments. As with all operations, the credit goes to the employees. We have excellent employees who go above and beyond, which makes our management level much easier. So, you know, what is a normal snow? Well, I don't know if I can answer what a normal snow is, but in the past, a normal event would be maybe snow during the day and into the evening, and then plow at 1 a.m. That was pretty common. However, over the last few years, it seems to have changed a little bit on the timing. We do a little more daytime plowing than we've done in the past. That certainly has challenges with the traffic. It's a much faster, smoother operation at night, but it's all part of the process. So what would happen on the beginning stages of a snow event? Well, a lot of watching the forecast all the time, year round, and then we normally kind of form a plan a little bit of how we think the storm will sequence, or maybe how it'll play out, and then a lot of times it may or may not, so you need to be fluid. You need to be fluid with that. So as we walk through that and we go through the forecast and kind of formulate a plan a little bit, if it was a normal, maybe it started in the morning, how do we determine to sand, and how do we determine to plow, and those type of things. So the street superintendent, who's Mark Glander, he gets up very often during the night, and probably on the hour, on the events where we're expecting weather, and checks the conditions and makes that call. So most likely the sanders would be dispatched initially. There's 4 sander routes, and obviously there's 4 trucks that run those routes. So that's usually the first out of the gate, that first small amount of snow, slick conditions. If it's sequenced properly, can we get that sand and salt down on the roads before the morning commute is part of the goal. But then we'll continue to monitor the condition. We use the plan, and it's in our policy that we plow at 2 inches or more or greater of snowfall. You know, that you have to be subjective a little bit, or it is subjective, and you have to be a little flexible, kind of watch what's forecasted, watch the radar. Years ago, you know, we didn't have the luxury of the excellent radar that everybody has that they can just pull up on their smartphone or on their computer. We used to we had a satellite dish in our office with radar that we would watch all the time. And of course, that has become antiquated now. But then, as the snow would continue during the day, we would probably sand again if needed, and then during the day plow the major routes or major streets and emergency routes. We have a series of streets that we call emergency routes that we try to keep open all the time. You know, things like by the hospital, by the nursing homes, by the fire station, Main, you know, East and West, 4th Street and 4th Avenues, and et cetera. So then if the conditions allow, the crew will go home at approximately 5 p.m. And then if it's really adverse conditions where we're getting a lot of snow and we need to work on the emergency routes, then we have some other folks that are able to drive the trucks maybe for a couple hours in that interim before they come in at 1 a.m. to hit those emergency routes one more time. And those are folks that are normally not in a truck.
And there have been times when you have had to call the plows off. Isn't that correct? And just make sure that maybe just the emergency routes are being taken care of?
Absolutely, and I only remember one time recently that we had to pull all the plows, even the emergency routes, because, you know, we all remember like blizzards of 75 or conditions like that where it's just not safe to be out. But for the most part, we continue to run those routes, the emergency routes, if possible. But that's a good point. So then if when we come in at 1 a.m., that would be 3 plow routes. There'd be the north, the west, and the south is how we call them, with 6 operators. And then we'd also have an end loader operator that comes in at night as well at the same time. So the routes, I have to check a couple notes, make sure I don't forget anything. But then as they start to plow, then the west route, which is more around the Deerfield and YMCA area, and about 2 or 3 in the morning, then they break off and go to the airport. And then we plow the main route, the main runway of the airport and a taxiway. We have to close the airport and then open it back up. And so if anybody needs to come in or get off the ground, we have that ready to go. They're back onto the routes. And then it takes about, continuing on the snow event, probably about 7 hours to plow the routes.
And how many miles of streets do we have to plow on a regular basis, on a regular snowfall,
Sure.
including not just the emergency routes, but all of the streets?
Just short of 100 miles, and then 7 miles of alleys, I believe is what it is. And then we it's a little factoid that may surprise people. We have 38 acres of concrete that we remove snow at the airport, so there's a lot of hard surface there, so.
Yeah, 38 acres, I mean, just as a visual is like 38 football fields, basically.
Yeah, there's a lot, yeah, there's a lot, so, as they work through the routes, then the end loader operator gets done a little earlier, then they will start on cul-de-sacs, because when you plow with a one-way plow or even the two-way plow, there's nowhere for the snow to go on a cul-de-sac, so, you know, it's a little bit of a balancing act, but.
That's a challenge,
Yeah,
to
it
be
is.
sure.
It is, and try not to put a big pile right in the way, and then they'll come in and open the with end loaders cul-de-sacs, and then also work on the lift stations, and then it's about 7 hours, and they're just starting to get done, and then the drivers take a break, which they've been going pretty much solid for 7 hours, and they take a half-hour break and eat breakfast, and then they get back in the trucks, and then 4 trucks are out on the sanding routes again, and then about 6 people go out and do sidewalks. So then you forget that we're doing sidewalks as well. And what sidewalks are we doing? Well, that'd be the ones around city property, like the city parking lots, the library, and that type of thing. And then that takes about an hour to an hour and a half. Then those folks also go back out to the airport with trucks when they're caught up. And the end loader that was working cul-de-sacs, he also goes to the airport after breakfast as well. We got one of those big, like a 20-foot wide pusher that goes on that for the apron. And then one of the other plow operators gets into another loader, and then they start finishing the cul-de-sac type loader work. And then we have to clean the impound area for if we do towed cars the next night, and go back and hit some of the intersections and opening up some of the ones where you may have a large windrow across, a road or something. And then as that's happening in the morning, then Public Works lead staff is then coordinating the following night's cleanup on Grand Avenue. So for the most part, around noon the following day, most of the initial routes have been covered. We've established where we need to be the next night. What happens the next night? That's our downtown snow removal with the parking lots, Grand Avenue, and the core area. Also, when we talked about the routes with the 3 trucks, or the 6 trucks and the 3 routes, we also have the core area route, which is ran with 2 motor graders the same night. I didn't mention that earlier, and I should have.
Well,
So.
and Mark probably wouldn't tell you this, but there are times when Mark and also the Assistant Public Works Director, Mark Craig, have to get in the plows themselves and operate them.
We try to do that quietly without bringing
Yeah.
much attention,
Yeah.
but in the poor conditions, in that interim, we certainly do that throughout the year.
Yeah, and I think people would be interested to know, this snow just doesn't evaporate, obviously, once you clear it from Grand or the parking lots. Where do we take the snow?
Well, we have some area by the wastewater treatment plant that we haul snow to, and that's where all the downtown snow, and we allow the businesses to haul to there as well. The trick can be is right now, where we're going to pick up tonight. We're going to go in at midnight tonight to remove downtown snow. That ground isn't frozen, so you can't have a bunch of heavy trucks out and getting stuck and going into the mud. So then at those conditions, we sometimes will dump at the aquatic center on the parking lot and blow it out into the park with a blower, or East 8th Street out in the green industrial.
Sure.
The following night, when we do pickup, that's an organized orchestrated operation as well. So that will take a minimum of 5 street division employees and usually a couple solid waste employees. So it come 2 motor graders, 2 loaders. The 1 loader switches over to a blower. You can almost set your watch. Every time we pick up snow at 2 a.m. at Hy-Vee, we're starting going south, loading the snow off of Grand Avenue with a blower. And then we simply can't have enough manpower or equipment, so then we hire rental trucks for that as well to help. And that we have those folks scheduled for tonight. Also, a pickup operator will come in with a V-plow that does a lot of cleanup work, like if the crumbs, maybe overshoot the blower, or you don't want to make another pass, and they can make it easier, make it a little more efficient. And then, as previously mentioned, then the 2 roll-off trucks from the solid waste division, we have those folks they come in at 2, the folks that haul and the equipment operators come in at midnight. So you can see in
Yeah.
a 24-hour period, there's a lot of hours and a lot of things that happen.
Yeah, and no pun intended, but there are a lot of moving parts to
Yeah,
this
yeah.
operation.
Hopefully not falling off, but moving
Yeah,
definitely. So.
for sure. And, I know it's not under your purview necessarily, but we have an extensive trail system in the city. And I believe it's under the Parks Department that those guys go out and clear the snow off the trails.
Absolutely, and the parks does that, and also the cemetery has been assists with part of the trail system also. They have the trail system ranked into different categories. This is in the 24-hour period that we'll talk about on probably sidewalks coming up. This is the next phase that when they get time, they get back to, and then some trails, when the winter gets a lot of snow and it's hard to keep up, they may not do those trails, and then that could be used maybe for cross-country skiing or something to that effect.
Sure.
But they have different categories that they do.
Yeah. So, and one more thing with regard to snow removal, and you may talk about this a little bit with sidewalks and
Sure.
that sort of thing. But I just want to make a point to folks that with regard to fire hydrants, that it's important that if there's a fire hydrant on your corner or in your neighborhood or something, if you could clear that fire hydrant, it makes it so much easier for our firefighters to have access to that hydrant if it's already cleared away.
Boy, that says a lot, especially if it's, it's a real good community thing to do, be proactive with that. It's something you kind of take for granted at times, but we, God forbid, it would be your home or your neighbor's, so it's helpful. And SMU had a program recently where they repainted the fire hydrants, so they're bright yellow and pretty easy to see right now. Most folks know where they're at, but if they're covered with snow, the emergency people may not.
So, Mark, did you want to talk a little bit about what constitutes, well, you talked a little bit about what constitutes a snow emergency and what people have to do to get their vehicles off the street, and what the ordinance says with regard to sidewalks and
Sure.
that sort of thing.
Well, the snow ordinance, is when that goes into effect, that is when 2 inches of snow is predicted or has already fallen. And per the ordinance, that official measuring spot is at KICD, but it's always more than 2, and rarely have I ever seen it where it's a subjective number on that, because we always try to err on the conservative side. It's clearly needs to be plowed. And so then there's no parking on the city streets from 12 a.m. to 7 a.m. That technically continues for another 48 hours behind that, but if for the most part, if the streets are plowed and clearly we're not going to go back, we don't do anything the second night. So the police chief and the police department do a really nice job of going above and beyond on that snow ordinance. The way it's written, it doesn't require any notification, but we don't, that is not the city's goal to tow a car. The goal is to have a smooth, safe, efficient snow removal process.
And it's all about safety, really, and as you said, efficiency as well. But it's actually for the safety of everybody concerned in this. And I know when that ordinance was first enacted, it took a lot of education on the part of the city and the citizens, and we've come a long way. We don't have nearly the number of people receiving citations anymore.
Well, it's considerably less, and one of the little things before we had the snow ordinance, then we'd plow around the cars, and then we talked about being done plowing at noon. Well, then everybody would go back out on the routes at 1 p.m. and plow where all the cars were at. So at a minimum, there was 4 hours additional plowing on each route every storm. So then, the police will say, it's the first storm, and we're gonna catch some folks off guard, so the first storm, which was last night for the most part plowing, then they don't ticket on the first night. They'll put a little inside of a sealed Ziploc bag and put it under the windshield. Hey, you would have been towed or you would have been ticketed. So I remember, initially, like you mentioned, there was like 70 plus, but last year at the end, there's less than 10, I think, in a night, and we certainly call that a success, and that's not our goal at all.
No, not at all. And I think, as I said, it's educating everybody as to why it's necessary to get your car off of the street in a timely fashion. And we also have to realize that even though we've had this ordinance for several years now, we have new residents moving into Spencer on a yearly basis. We can't take that for granted either, and they may not know the ordinance. So this is a good program.
Well, and it's, it's education and constant reminding, and maybe somebody works at different hours, they could be sleeping while maybe the notification goes out. So we would encourage folks to go to the city website, and you can sign up for Clay Alert, and then you can get a call on your cell phone or your home phone, which it's been at 6 and 9, I think, and he's going to move those hours back a little bit to try to make it a little more user-friendly for folks.
Yeah, I think,
and the police chief.
the chief talked about maybe making that 4 o'clock and 8 o'clock, something
Yeah, yes.
on that line. So, okay. So, anything else you'd
Well-
like to cover here?
Well, the one thing that may find it surprising when we do the sand and salt operations, which is sand and chloride and salt, last year we put down 626 ton of material. So then, that's not the end. We have to pick that back up. So the most part, that's what the sweepers do in the spring, or if we get some nice weather, try to keep that out of the sewer system. So that's yet again another component that a person doesn't think of.
Yeah, that's a good point that you make too. That that material has to go somewhere. It
Goes down and come back up.
Yeah, it
So,
does.
yeah.
It does.
Yeah,
So-
but we really try to do a good job. We spend a lot. We put a lot of effort towards it. It's not perfect, like all systems. At times there can be a little glitch once in a while, but we certainly make a strong effort towards that, and it's thanks to a lot of good employees to make it work.
Yeah, and Mark, I just want to thank you again for coming in today and talking about this. I think is very timely, obviously.
It was.
And thanks to all of the city employees who, as you just documented, come in at all hours of the day to get this operation done. It takes away from some of the regular kinds of maintenance types of things, obviously, that we have to do. But we have to deal with a snow event, and it has to be done in a systematic way. And you guys have really got that down to a science, I think.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We didn't invent the system. We just were curators, and we continue to modify or improve. The routes are laid out to where there's the least amount of backtracking, and you always turn right because that's the way you square a corner. So it just continues to evolve.
Yeah.
One thing we could probably talk about is a little bit about the sidewalks.
Oh, yeah.
So the city ordinance is the sidewalks have to be scooped within 24 hours after the end of the snow event. And that can be a challenge once in a while. And we do have folks that go out and take a look, and if they're not scooped, we do have a contractor that will scoop them. It's not at 24 hours right after the bat. It's probably 3 days out by the time we get through the first event. The day and then the evening of the event, and then the next day kind of catch up and then following. So it's not like they're laying in the weeds to go out. It's the ones that are obviously didn't get completed. And then the downtown district, that's 12 hours. And the reason that's 12 hours is we're back up in the core district removing those sidewalks from that follow. Well, we're not removing the sidewalks. The snow that's been pushed from the sidewalk to the street, we pick up the snow from the street the following night, and you know, you always get it cleaned, and maybe there was somebody that inadvertently forgot, and then you get some snow
Yeah.
pushed into the parking stall, and then as the weather temperatures may or may not be conducive to some melting. during the
Right, well,
winter,
let's
so-
hope that we do get a little melting here later in the week. and
Absolutely.
Help us all out.
Yeah, it makes us look better.
Yeah, so, okay. Thank you again,
Very good.
Mark.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it and appreciate the work that you do.
Yeah, thanks
So,
for highlighting.
yeah,
Appreciate
thanks.
it.
Okay, well, again, thanks to Mark White for coming in today and talking with us about snow removal and that whole operation, which is a huge operation that goes on within the city of Spencer. No question about that. Before I get into some of the city of Spencer type of things, I want to just highlight some community events that are taking place within the city and some of the nonprofits. First of all, Arts on Grand has in their gallery, Christmas in the Gallery, and that will be, that exhibit will be up through January 12th. And they also have tickets, I believe, on sale for the Festival of Trees. You can stop down at Arts on Grand and talk with them about that. Spencer Community Theater has Miracle on 34th Street is the next show that they'll be doing, and that starts this Friday, December 2nd, and runs the first and second weekends in December. Main Street has a huge event coming up this Monday, the Grand Meander, and it's been a tradition in Spencer for a long time. And that is this Monday, December 5th from 5 to 7. The Jolly Old Elf Santa will be making his presence at the fire station at 6 o'clock and make his way down Grand Avenue to the Tree of Joy by the police department a little bit later. Also, Tuba Christmas is going on at Occasions, which was formerly the Senior Center. And Nancy Nave, the director of Main Street, wants to thank everyone who stopped downtown to shop small Saturday last weekend. And speaking of that, in communicating with Sharifa Jones, the chamber director, she wants to urge citizens to shop local and use the chamber gift cards. That's a new item this year, the chamber gift cards. And if anyone has any chamber dollars, chamber bucks that they might have laying around, you can take those to the chamber and exchange them now for a gift card. And then lastly, with regard to our nonprofits, if you haven't had an opportunity, and I've mentioned this a few times before, to take in the exhibit at the Heritage Center, the Marion Helland 9 Decades of Civil Rights Service. It's just an outstanding exhibit, and Marion Helland was an incredible woman who did such great service for folks down in the South at the Freedom Schools in the 1960s, and just a great event, a great exhibit, I should say. So, I wanted to just talk a little bit about some of the council actions that were taken in November. And November may have seemed like a fairly light council meeting month, the 2 meetings that we had. And a lot of the types of things were pretty much business as usual types of things. And I'm going to go through some of these here in just a moment. But even though it may not look like we had a heavy agenda, or there wasn't, it was just kind of perfunctory. We had a lot of things on the consent agenda, or things just went through without a lot of conversation and discussion by the council. It's still, all of these items require a great deal of work and preparation by our outstanding city staff. And they're the ones that make the job for the people who sit up here during council meetings sometimes look pretty easy. But I guarantee you it's not easy. There's a lot of preparation. They do a lot of work behind the scenes that make the city machine run smoothly. But I just wanted to highlight some of the things that the council did. And as I said, these are not grandiose types of things. These are just business as usual types of items. First, one of the things we did was we approved an agreement with the hospital for a new position called the Navigator, and it's a collaborative effort on behalf of the hospital, the Seasons, the county, the city, to help in our efforts within our community to help facilitate mental health awareness. And I think everybody knows that that is becoming an issue that is being highlighted more and more. And I think this position will help our community as a whole move forward. We approved allocation of money to nonprofits, Upper Des Moines, Kiwanis, JC's, the Splash Program, through the Hepner Trust. Now, the Hepner Trust is not, it is a pool of money. There is a separate board of trustees that allocates the trust funds and allocates the amounts of money that go to these various nonprofits. We also approved the purchase of a pickup for the solid waste division, and that was in the CIP, the Capital Improvement Program. We also approved an engineering contract with Cruz Caton Nelson for development of a new landfill cell, something that we don't really think about all that much, but is vital to the operation of our solid waste operation in the city of Spencer. We approved a CDBG grant, and that's a community development grant for $600,000. We had applied for it earlier in the year and didn't get it. We reapplied for it last summer and were awarded the contract. And this is for the East Side sewer separation project, which you'll be seeing the work go on next summer, I believe. And the CDBG funds are federal dollars that are run through the state. And we have help with that, writing that grant through the Northwest Iowa Planning and Development Commission. So by being awarded this $600,000, it will save the Spencer taxpayers a great deal of money. We also approved new software for the Public Works Department for fuel usage. And the old software was being phased out, and we had to approve this new software that, and I should have probably asked Mark about this while he was here, but all city vehicles are fueled down at the city garage on the east side of town by not by Stolly's, of course, by Oneota. School vehicles also use that fuel depot as well. We also approved a new contract with Vans Recycling in Lamar's for hauling away our recycling for $25 per ton. That was a significant increase, but it hadn't been increased for several years. So we still feel that this is a huge benefit to the citizens of Spencer. We average about 60 tons of recycling every month. That's a huge amount, 720 tons per year. So you can do the math on how much that is by taking that times $25, obviously. But one of the things, and this is what I think is critical, is that it saves our landfill space significantly. We are not taking 720 tons of recycling materials into the landfill that the city owns over by Grettinger, south of Grettinger. And the cost per ton to put solid waste into the landfill is significantly higher than that $25 per ton. So this saves us, it not only saves us money, but it also saves us life of the landfill. And we want that landfill to be able to go for several more generations, obviously. And I think that back in I think it was the early 2000s, maybe the late 1990s, that the city bought that property over there and made the decision to develop our own landfill. And I think it's been a good decision on behalf of the city. And then lastly, we approved a subcontractor for the North Water Quality Project for curb and gutter. Also, that project is one you've probably seen by QRS, and then over on the other side, just to the north of Community Bank and in the North Mall Shopping Center parking lot area, and that's a water retention project. So those are some of the things that we did during the course of the month, just business as usual types of things, but as I said, take a lot of work from behind the scenes. Next, I'd like to just touch on a few things that are kind of ongoing that we're still dealing with as a city. First of all, we had a facility study done, and I've touched on that the past couple of months. We've been waiting for the results. The results came in, and the engineering firm ISG came to Spencer last Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving, and presented their findings to city staff. There were some council members here, department heads were here to hear what those findings were. And basically they reported on the state of the city facilities. Now that excluded the fire station and it excluded City Hall, but most other facilities within the city were in the scope of that particular study. And what they did in that study and what they did in their presentation, and I'm certainly not going to go through it piece by piece, but what they did for the city staff, council members who were here, and the department heads was they suggested improvements. They looked at renovations that could happen. They also suggested in some cases new facilities. But it's basically just like your own home or your own business or something. If you don't keep up with things on a regular basis, things start to fall apart. And we want to make sure that our city facilities are at a point where they are in operation for best use. And not only for the employees, but also for the citizens of Spencer. We want them to be as efficient as possible. And things have changed, obviously, over the course of years when those facilities were built and what the operations now house and so forth. So anyway, the study gave us a great deal of fodder for conversation and discussion in the future, and I'm sure we're going to be talking about this for a long time to come, and it will also be in the short time as well. We've been meeting on a fairly regular basis with the city, or with the school rather, meeting about tennis courts. The Fairview tennis courts are basically unplayable. I don't know if you can get out there right now. They're probably covered with snow, obviously. But in looking at those courts, there are cracks all the way through them. I don't see how anybody could play tennis on those courts very well. And so we're talking with the school about going into a collaborative effort to build new tennis courts. And the option has come up with moving those tennis courts from Fairview School, the Fairview Park area, to the middle school area. And the middle school has ground over there that would house those courts very nicely, I think, with a lot of parking and so forth. Obviously, those courts would be available to the public. And we wouldn't want anybody to think that, well, geez, if they're on school property, the citizens can't use them. No, that's not it at all. Obviously, if there was a tennis match or tennis tournament or something like that that the school had, they'd be off limits for that period of time. But they certainly would be available to the Spencer public. Also, if we build new tennis courts, regardless of where they're located, they'll also include lines for pickleball, which is becoming much more popular than I ever imagined that it could possibly be. But anyway, this is an ongoing conversation. It's being spearheaded on the city's behalf by Bob Fullhart, the new Parks Director, and Jason Albrecht from the school is meeting with Bob on a pretty regular basis to see how this can go. And hopefully we'll be able to get bids out early next year to look at those tennis courts. The odor issue from Simrise continues to pop up, and City Manager Dan Gifford and Planning Director Adam Severson are in weekly communication, if not more, with the plant manager at Simrise, and trying to see and make sure that Simrise's plan to eradicate the odor issue is moving forward as it should be. And the conversations, again, are ongoing with regard to that. One of the city goals that we established last February was the rehabilitation of the swimming pool, which the facility is getting older, it's aging, it needs some maybe some new amenities, but also some rehabilitation to the existing plant structure. We also talked about a campground and moving the existing campground. It's obviously that campground was built, it's in a floodplain. When the river does flood, campground is not usable on that lower level. The electrical units are not up to the standards that most campgrounds are today, and also the size of the camping pads themselves are not adequate to meet the needs of modern campers. So looking at the campground, also within that was development of a splash pad. Now, City Manager Dan Gifford, myself, and Bob Fullhart, new Parks Director, were not on board when that plan was originated, and so a couple of weeks ago, Stockwell Engineering, who had developed the plan for and looked at the swimming pool campground splash pad, came into Spencer, talked to Bob Fullhart, City Manager. There were several other people around the table as well, and but some of us weren't there when the plan was initially presented. So it was a good conversation. They informed us about the entire plan. They talked a little bit about the cost of the plan, but since the plan was originally originated, and now we all know that we're going through a period of inflation, so those figures may not be what they were obviously back when the plan was originally presented. But I think everybody is now up to date and up to pace on what the plan is, and I think we're now in a position that we can start to move that goal forward in a pretty good fashion. Next, I'd like to just talk a little bit about something that we did here in City Hall in early November. We had a disaster plan simulation. I may have mentioned this in one of the mayor's reports that I gave during or after a council meeting, or during council meeting, I should say. But we had a disaster plan simulation, and I think it's important that you plan for the unthinkable. And obviously, communities throughout the state have had to deal with disasters, whether they're tornadoes, whether they're floods, whether they are derechos, whatever it might be. And so we contacted Eric Tigas, who's the Clay County Emergency Management, and asked if Eric would put together a simulation, a scenario that we would have to deal with. So the department heads and Mayor Pro Tem Bill Orison, myself, city staff, all met in the council chambers. We had tables out in the chambers, and Eric led us through a simulation involving a tornado that hit Spencer. And then basically what we had to do is he would give us questions, what he called injections, and these were questions, and how would we respond and what would we do? And so he had department heads, he had public safety at one table, the other department heads, and then he had the city staff at another table. And so he had three different kinds of questions that we all had to grapple with. And then we reported out on those, and then he would say, okay, now this is 4 hours later. Here are three other scenarios. Here are three other things that are going on. And we had to wrap our heads around those and talk with the other folks. How are we going to handle the situation? It was an excellent exercise. I think everybody thought that it was well planned by Eric. My congratulations to him and thanks for coming up with this. But there were several takeaways, and just a few that I want to mention. First of all, this was a much needed exercise. I think there are a lot of new people within the city staff, within the department heads and so forth. We need to do this on a regular basis. I think we need to do this on a yearly basis. And it obviously doesn't have to be the same scenario. It shouldn't be the same scenario, obviously. But I think we should also include the elected officials in this, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. My second takeaway on this is the professionalism that was exhibited by our department heads. They were outstanding. I mean, everything that was thrown at them, they were able to say, here's what we're going to do, here's how we're going to do it, and come up with a plan for everything that Eric threw at them. The other thing was the collaboration and the teamwork that I saw in that room was outstanding. And that's what it's going to take in order to get us through, and hopefully we never have to do it, get us through a situation like that. During the kind of debriefing of this, one of the things, and this is another takeaway on the situation that I'd like to just mention, and that is we need to have a better plan for how we utilize volunteers. Because in any kind of situation like that, emergency situation, the natural inclination for people is they want to help. They want to help in any way that they can. And we have to have some sort of systematic method and where volunteers are adequately used. And so Jessica Wright, who is our HR director, has volunteered, or maybe she was tasked, I can't remember. But she is, I'm pretty sure she volunteered to coordinate that effort. So we're going to be working on that. So we also need to have a better plan for how elected officials are brought into the fold and how information is disseminated to them as well as the situation is occurring. So just as an aside to that simulation, Eric suggested a workshop on leadership and media awareness in Storm Lake that I might want to attend, and I did take him up on that. And the goal of the workshop was how to interact with the media and the public in times of emergency. And there were leaders from all over Northwest Iowa who attended at the Buena Vista County Sheriff's Department, And it was a very, very good presentation, very good workshop. We got a lot out of it. It was just excellent. So, couple more things. First of all, upcoming in the month of December and January and February, the City Council will be very much working and starting to work on the budget process. I know the department heads have been very much working on that diligently starting in October. So now it's going to the council's going to have to start doing some heavy lifting, and especially the finance committee, and my hat's off to them for the work that they do, along with the finance director, Brian Weave, on putting the budget together. So there will be a lot more conversation coming up about that, I'm sure. And then to close, I'd like to again thank Mark White and to all of the city crews who work so hard for the city of Spencer. And with that, I want to wish everyone a very happy holiday season upcoming, and take care and do good. Thank you very much.